At night, when your fingertips rest against your own forehead and you feel the faint warmth of skin over bone, you are closer to the Ark of the Covenant than most people have ever imagined. Right there, above your eyes, inside the living structure you carry every day. That sounds outrageous until you let the Bible speak in its own order. Most people begin with the chest itself, but the stranger verse comes later. Jeremiah chapter 3 verse 16 says, "The days will come when people will no longer say, 'The ark of the covenant of the Lord.' It will not come to mind. It will not be remembered. It will not be visited." Now stop and feel the weight of that. Why would Scripture talk that way about the holiest object in Israel's worship if it were only a relic to be recovered? So now you go back to Exodus chapter 25, verses 10 through 22, and the details become almost unnervingly precise. A sacred container, a covering called the mercy seat, two cherubim facing one another, their attention fixed toward the center. And then the line that changes everything. God says he will meet there and speak there from between them, from the space in the middle. What kind of holy design puts the voice in the interval, in the gap, in the hidden place between two mirrored forms? That is how you describe a pattern. And if Jeremiah hints that the outer object was never meant to hold your attention forever, then maybe Exodus was drawing a map long before you knew you had one. And the moment you see what those two facing figures may actually be, the whole mystery shifts under your feet. If this kind of deep Bible decoding speaks to you, leave a like and stay with me. And that is where the old image stops being decorative and starts becoming anatomical. Ask yourself this: if the holy chest is built around two beings facing each other across a center, what in you lives that way right now, structurally? You have two great halves inside the skull, folded like pale cloth, wet with blood, softly pulsing in the dark. They do not do the same job. They answer the world differently. One tracks sequence and speech with a kind of narrow precision. The other catches shape, tone, distance, mood. Two sides under one bone roof, both looking inward toward a shared middle. That sounds poetic until modern science stumbles into the same pattern. In the early 1980s, Roger Sperry was honored for work on split-brain patients, people whose major bridge between the hemispheres had been cut for medical reasons. What he found was unsettling. When that connection is interrupted, each side can act with a strange independence. One hand reaches for something the other seems to resist. A word can be known on one side and hidden from the other. You begin to see why the Ark of the Covenant places attention on a pair, not a single figure. Conscious life, at least in part, arrives as a conversation. So what joins the pair? Exodus gives you a clue. An image before anatomy gives you a term. The facing cherubim stretch outward over the cover, and above them the sacred meeting point is held. In your own head, there is a white arch of fibers, the corpus callosum, carrying signals back and forth in a living exchange so fast you never hear it. That bridge is the reason your world feels whole. And once you let that sink in, the next line in Exodus becomes almost too precise to ignore. Because the voice is not said to come from one side or the other, it comes from between them. And that small phrase, between them, is where the whole thing tightens. You can read Exodus 100 times and miss the oddity because your mind runs past it. But sacred language slows you down on purpose. The chest has a lid. The lid has a name, the mercy seat. The pair are placed above it, and the speaking happens in the narrow middle. So ask the next question carefully. If the two sides echo the two hemispheres, what sits in the center of the head with that same quiet authority over what reaches you. Deep in the brain, there is a set of structures called the thalamus, the inner chamber. The Old Greek word carried the sense of a private room, an enclosed place, the kind of hidden space you do not enter casually. In anatomy, that name stayed. And what does this chamber do? It stands in the path of almost everything you consciously receive. Sight, touch, sound, pressure, movement. Signals rise, pass through, are sorted, relayed, permitted forward. It is not a throne in the romantic sense. It is a gate, warm and living, tucked in the dim center beneath the upper folds. Now hear the old line again with that in your mind. From between the cherubim, the voice. From the middle, access. From the inner place, encounter. Suddenly the design of the Ark of the Covenant stops feeling ornamental. It begins to feel mapped. Even the arrangement makes more sense than the usual picture in your head, because revelation in Scripture so often comes through ordered approach, through veils, through thresholds, through guarded rooms. And once you see that, another detail starts pressing forward from the text. A sacred container is one thing, a speaking center is another. But Hebrews chapter 9 says something was kept inside it. 3 things, in fact. And the first of them is the strangest of all. And once the center of the ark starts to read like a living chamber, the objects inside it stop feeling random. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 4 says the sacred chest held the golden pot, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. Most people hear that as inventory, the way you'd list items on a shelf. But inside this pattern, each object starts acting like a clue. Take the tablets first. 2 stone surfaces, marked with command, carried inside the holiest container Israel knew. If this design reaches into the human head, then the image of law written on stone suddenly gets close enough to touch. Run your tongue over your teeth. Feel the hardness of bone around the mouth, the solid vault above your eyes. The skull is a stone house. Inside it, your learned patterns, your restraint, your memory of what must and must not be done are not floating ideas. They are laid down in living pathways. That matters because the Ark of the Covenant is never only about presence, it is about order. A holy meeting place without structure would be chaos. So the tablets fit. They point to inscription, to rule, to pattern fixed deep within. Psalm chapter 40, verse 8 says, "Thy law is within my heart." Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 33 says, "The law will be written within." Scripture itself keeps moving the writing inward. And then there is the rod. Numbers chapter 17 says it was set before the testimony, and by morning the dead staff had changed. Dry wood, then buds, then blossoms, then almond fruit. Inside the chest, a sign of life rising where no life should rise. If the tablets hint at pattern, the rod hints at ascent. Something vertical, something carried upward into that hidden room, something that flowers at the top. But the deepest strangeness is still waiting there beside it, in a vessel of gold, because the next object is not carved and not wooden. It is a substance nobody could properly name, and that unnamed substance is where the chest turns even more intimate. Exodus chapter 16 says the people looked at it and asked, "What is it?" That question became its name, manna. It arrived with the morning dew, fine on the ground, small enough to miss if you were not paying attention. It had to be gathered in measure. It could not be hoarded without trouble. Then, Hebrews says a portion of that mystery was placed inside the holy container, held there like a witness. So ask yourself what kind of inner sign fits that pattern in the ark. Something subtle, measured, renewing, tied to timing, and easily spoiled when the rhythm is ignored. Now bring the body back into view. Deep near that central region, close to the chamber we already traced, sits a tiny gland long wrapped in sacred fascination, the pineal. Small as a seed, tucked behind the eyes in darkness, it belongs to cycles of night and day. It answers light. It answers absence of light. Your inner life is not only shaped by structure, by hemispheres and bridges and the mercy seat above them. It is also shaped by timing, by hidden chemistry, by what awakens only when the outer world grows dim and quiet. That is why the manna image matters so much. It is less about food on a plate than provision you do not manufacture. It comes. It is received. It is gathered in the right condition. The old chest preserves that idea in gold, because whatever this points to is precious precisely because it is so easy to overlook. You rush past it in noise. You miss it in glare. You cannot bully it into appearing. And once you start reading the ark that way, the three objects begin to form a living sequence. Law written within, life rising upward, nourishment given in secret. Which means the next question is no longer where the chest was carried, but under what conditions its pattern comes alive in you. So what wakes this pattern up? And why would Scripture ever expect you to move past the object itself? You can feel the answer already in the way the Bible talks about holy space. First, there is the chest. Then there is the tent around it. Then the temple. But even while those places are being honored, the text keeps whispering that none of them can contain what they point toward. In 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 27, Solomon stands in the house he has built, with cedar scent in the air and smoke from sacrifice rising. And he says, "The heaven and heaven of heavens cannot contain thee." That matters. If even the temple cannot hold the presence, then the ark was never meant to trap it. Then the New Testament presses harder. In Acts chapter 17, verse 24, Paul says, God does not dwell in temples made with hands. In John chapter 4, verses 21 through 24, Jesus shifts worship away from mountain and shrine and towards spirit and truth. You can hear the movement, can't you? The sacred chest is still holy, still charged, still central to the story, but the current is flowing inward. The symbol is being fulfilled. That is why Jeremiah could speak of the day when people would stop visiting it. Not because it failed, and not because it stopped mattering, but because a sign can finish its work once the thing it signifies is recognized. The box teaches. The body receives the lesson. The outer form trains the inner approach. And that changes the ark from a lost object into a living instruction. The question stops being, where was it carried? The question becomes, how do you enter what it was sketching all along? Because Scripture does give an answer to that too. And it begins with a door, a private room, and the shutting out of every other voice. And that private room language is not a side note. It is part of the same design. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 6, Jesus says, "When thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret." Hear how close that sounds to the old pattern. A protected place, a closed entrance, an unseen meeting. If the Ark of the Covenant was teaching inward approach from the beginning, then this instruction stops being small devotional advice. It starts sounding like the next stage of the same map. So what does shutting the door mean if the true sanctuary is carried in the body? It means reducing the flood that keeps your attention chained to the outer world. Light on the walls, noise in the ears, movement in the room, the pull of screens, the restless twitch of thought. All of that keeps the chamber crowded. The old holy places were set apart for a reason. The nervous system has its own version of that separation. When stimulation lowers, the whole field changes. Breath becomes audible. The weight of your jaw becomes noticeable. The soft pressure behind closed eyelids begins to feel like a threshold. This is where the chest stops being ancient furniture and becomes instruction for attention. The law within steadies you. The rising rod suggests alignment, like the body held upright. The hidden mana points to what appears under the right conditions. And that central relay we traced earlier, that secret chamber under the upper folds, is not just a term from anatomy. It becomes the place where your scattered signals are gathered and sifted. You do not force a revelation there. You make room for one. The old tabernacle always prepared before encounter. And once you understand that, one more verse begins to glow with a strange new force, because Scripture also speaks of the eye becoming single. And that is where this pattern turns from symbolic to intensely personal. And that saying about the eye is stranger than most people let it be. Matthew chapter 6, verse 22 says, "If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light." Set that beside the old chest for a moment. A guarded center, a hidden chamber, two sides brought into relation. Then a condition in which the body is filled from within. You can hear the same current moving through all of it. The pattern is no longer only architectural, it becomes experiential. Something about inward unity changes what reaches consciousness. Now, think about the paired world we already traced. Two hemispheres, joined in living exchange. Signals gathered, sorted, admitted. When your attention is scattered, you live from fragments. Sound pulls you one way, memory another, appetite another. But when the field settles, when breath slows and the body grows still enough to hear its own pulse in the ears, those divided streams begin to organize. The old image of the facing cherubim starts to feel less like ornament and more like an instruction about alignment. That is why the saints and mystics kept returning to stillness, darkness, and watchfulness, as condition, not theater. The sacred chest always belonged to a system of approach. Lamps, veil, incense, silence, boundary. The nervous system has boundaries too. It changes under reduced light. It changes when the jaw unclenches, when the eyes rest behind closed lids, when the flood from the senses eases. You are not leaving Scripture when you notice that. You are following its form inward. And that prepares you for the final turn. Because once the Ark of the Covenant is read as a map of gathered awareness, the old prophecy from Jeremiah stops sounding tragic. It begins to sound merciful. The object fades so the meaning can stand up inside the person carrying it. But if that is true, then one question remains, and it is the one nobody can answer for you. How do you actually enter that hidden place without pretending? And the only honest answer is that you enter it the way all sacred space is entered. By preparation, by quiet, by consent. You do not storm this chamber. You do not perform your way into it. The old pattern of the ark still governs the approach. There is order first, then stillness, then attention. Sit down somewhere dim. Let the room cool around you. Hear the faint hum in the walls, the soft drag of your own breathing, the little crackle in your throat when you swallow. Keep the spine easy and upright, the way a lampstand is meant to stand. Let the hands rest. Let the eyes close without strain. If the chest was a map, then this is how you stop walking past the place it marks. What are you doing in that moment? You are giving the paired mind a chance to stop fighting for the wheel. You are lowering the noise that keeps the signals scattered. The bridge between the halves, the corpus callosum, never stops working, but your awareness rarely notices the joining because it is buried under interruption. In silence, the joining becomes easier to feel. Thoughts still come, of course. Old words, images, plans, worries. Let them pass across the upper field like shadows moving over a curtain. Stay near the center. Stay near the breath. Stay near the hidden room. And then something subtle begins, more like a gathering. The body feels less divided. The forehead softens. The pressure behind the eyes changes. The inward space seems to deepen, as if attention were moving toward a seat already waiting there. This is why the old text placed the meeting in the middle. The mercy seat was never about decoration. It was about where awareness becomes available. And if that is true, then the last thing you need to ask is the most unsettling of all. When Jeremiah said people would stop visiting it, what if he was telling you exactly when the outer search was supposed to end? And that is the turn. Jeremiah never sounded like a man mourning a lost artifact. He sounded like a man announcing the end of a lesson. They shall say no more, the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Once you have walked through Exodus, through the paired mind Roger Sperry helped uncover, through the hidden center where signals gather, through the law within and the secret provision that comes only in quiet, that old sentence stops sounding empty. It sounds complete. The sign recedes because the reality it served has come near enough to be recognized. So the search changes shape. The gold chest, the mercy seat, the guarded middle, the holy contents, they remain radiant in Scripture. Nothing is being taken away from them. But they begin to stand the way a doorway stands after you have crossed it. You still honor the frame. You just do not mistake the frame for the room. That is why the old language keeps moving from tent to temple to spirit to the inward chamber. It has been leading you, step by step, toward the place where hearing becomes possible. And that place is far closer than fear ever allowed. It is there when the room goes dim and the body grows still. It is there when the noise falls back and attention stops scattering itself across every bright thing. It is there in the hidden meeting between divided powers, where the many little fragments of you begin to gather under one silence. The chest was teaching you how to approach that all along. By then, the mystery isn't a missing object. It is the hush that arrives when the outer hunt finally loosens its grip, and something older than words waits in the center, as patient as a lamp burning behind a curtain. The house is quiet now. Your breathing is the only sound in it. And somewhere beneath the bone, the old sanctuary has never once been empty.